last night on our TV show, I had a long conversation with Morris Berman. In fact, we turned it into one of our conversations with great minds. It'll be up a little later in the day on the website for that. And Morris Berman has a new book out. He's the third in a trilogy, and the essence of all three of these books is basically that the United States is an empire, its time is over, and it's croaking. And if you look at the various countries of the world that have been empire, there are some really substantial similarities. And what you find is that when people are standing up and pointing it out, or try to fight back, they get ridiculed by the beneficiaries of empire and by the boosters for empire. And by empire, I'm talking about a political and economic system, and they are very much tied together. A political and economic system where there's basically three components to it. One is perpetual war. Empire is all about war, ongoing war, continuous war. And you think of all the countries that we've invaded in the last 30, 40 years. I mean, it's just you can see this is, or the last 200 years. I mean, 100 years anyway. This is one of the hallmarks of empire. An extension. Basically, it's like the country constantly is reaching out, both to provide employment for its young men in particular, but also to acquire assets and resources. Whether it was the Spaniards, the Spanish Empire, going into South and Central America looking for gold, or whether it was the Roman Empire 2,000 years ago, after they deforested Rome, spreading out and going up in through Europe looking for wood. It was an empire that almost crashed because it ran out of energy. When it became so expensive, when wood became so rare in Italy that they could no longer smelt their coins for less than the value of the coins because of the cost of the wood, that was the point at which they chose to expand. It was a couple hundred years BC. And so by 50 AD or so, there they are in England. And you can, this is the history that Jefferson wrote about in his many letters and in his journals and whatnot. When he sent his books to the University of Virginia Library, he said Tacitus is the one you had to read. Tacitus was the nephew of Agricola, the Roman emperor and leader, and he chronicled the wars of Rome against the original British people, the tribal British people, back around the time of Christ. And, that empire, so number one, war, and number 2 and 3, bread and circus. Keep people fed, keep them entertained, and give them a war to participate in, and you can maintain your empire. The problem is whether you look at the various countries that have been empires within recent memory. I don't mean our personal recent memory, but, that are close enough, near enough in. I mean, we don't pretty much study the Sumerian Empire or the Egyptian Empire or even the Mayan Empire, but the European empires of the last few hundred years. France, Germany, the UK, Sweden, Norway, Spain, Rome, Greece. Greece goes back a couple thousand years. Rome goes back, Greece is 3,000, Rome is 2,000. But these empires are fairly well studied by American students. And what you see is that they reach a point where they basically fall over. And as they fall over, they go through some sort of a transformation. Either they get wiped out and vanish, or they become just, hey, it's just us. It's just our country. And I would submit to you that was the subtext of Ross Perot's argument back in the election of 92. Don't get into GATT, don't get into the WTO. Let's go back to a protectionist America. You get 20% of the vote. You had Admiral Stockwell on there going, well, I don't think that we should be an empire all over the world. An empire is basically a bubble. It never survives. It's a cancer. It eats its host. And it depends on these three things, on bread, circus, and war. And frankly, there are signs of the collapse of empire that we are very much seeing right now. I mean, we have wildly exceeded our ability to sustain our presence all around the world. You have at home people saying, no, wait a minute, stop. Whether it's the Tea Party movement or the Occupy Wall Street movement, as I've said many times, the Tea Party movement, obviously, there was this AstroTurf element to it. But what it did is it brought out people who, many of them relatively politically unsophisticated, or they've been watching GOP TV for too many years. They call it Fox News, but when Roger Ailes suggested it to Richard Nixon back in '72, it was called GOP TV. And they've been watching GOP TV for too many years, and they have this kind of deformed, twisted worldview. And the Occupy Wall Street folks, I think, a fair number of them actually get it. And they're saying this can't be sustained. So what do we do? How do we back out of this? Well, you stop your wars internationally. You stop war as being an instrument of the acquisition of goods. Right now, we're using it to acquire oil, our energy supply. We're doing like Rome did with wood 2,000 years ago. You become self-sufficient, which we've been close to at times. We've been at times. We must become again. I think it was interesting, day before yesterday, Paul Krugman had a brilliant piece in the New York Times about how the price of solar is now basically to the point where it competes with anything. And if you were to actually take the costs associated with burning coal or oil that you and I pay for as taxpayers rather than the oil or coal companies, and added those on to the cost of oil and coal, solar's actually cheaper right now.